1. I grew up going to a private American school in a foreign country in Europe, which I shall not name. The school was situated kind of in the middle of a big hill, and even further above the school was something really special. An abandoned prison. Now, as if that was not shady enough, bordering the abandoned prison was a real prison. There was kind of like a wall separating the real prison and the abandoned one. So, anyway, us being teenagers, we decided to find a way to break into the abandoned part. We had already gotten beyond the second layer of the wall. There were a total of 3, and the wall ran all the way around with barbed wire in many places. One lunch break, I heroically managed to tear down a huge section of the wall during lunch, but the next day we arrived, and it was patched up by someone. That didn't stop us though. We climbed on through anyway, and decided to do some exploring. Now this happened over the course of many months, and it took us ages to work up the courage to finally get inside. A bunch of us were doing AP 2D art, and had our cameras with us at all times to get some shots. Half of my best work came from this prison. But one day, an event happened that made all of us swear to never go back. We took pictures of notebooks and logs we found, but I won't post them due to keeping the country unknown. So, as months went by, we got more and more confident about wandering about the prison. We never went too deep, and we were always scared of getting close to the wall with the real prison because there were always security guards. Sometimes we would run into some gypsies, scrapping for metal. Sometimes a random homeless person or two, but nothing ever dangerous. Once a couple of guys got busted by security, and we didn't go back for weeks. But eventually we learned the schedule of the guards and befriended the homeless who hung around there. So we were pretty comfortable. 2 years went by of some exploring here and there, until one night a friend and I decided to go there to do some late night shooting. We dressed up, organized our things, and met by one of the holes of the entry at midnight. We had videos of us going through some of the sections of the prison at night, but we deleted them out of fear. We never wanted to have anyone know what happened this night, and thought the videos could be traced. It was really dark in the depths of the prison, so the reason we were filming was to use the flashlight on our phones. This was a while back and you couldn't just press a button to get the light, but had to film something. Our goal tonight was to get as high up as we could. There were at least something like 10 floors, and almost all the staircases we had found during our daily exploring were sealed off. If we spent lunch breaking one down, the next day it would be repaired again. The prison was huge, and had many staircases all over the place. I will have access to the pictures in a few months if you want to see all the rooms. Now, most of the rooms were fairly large. Each floor was completely different to the previous one, and it was very hard to tell what went on here. From what we could gather, it was some sort of a labor factory the prisoners were forced to work in. We found some rooms completely full of shoe soles, another floor had a long hallway, and each room was vividly painted in different patterns. Some rooms had a lot of mattresses stacked on top of each other. You get it. A whole lot of creepy-ass rooms with random creepy-ass shit. Every new floor we explored was a totally new surprise, and it kept becoming more and more difficult to find ways to go higher up. But eventually we found it, and that's what we came there to do that night. Get to the roof. As I mentioned, this prison was on a hill, so the view was bound to be fantastic, and we thought at night the guards will have a harder time spotting us. So back to the night. We kept getting deeper and deeper, and it got darker and darker. There were dripping noises everywhere around us, and we couldn't tell if we were alone. We got to our desired staircase, and as we climbed up, there became fewer and fewer windows until we were climbing up into pitch darkness. I'm shaking as I'm even typing this, remembering the pure terror I felt. Nonetheless, it was the only unsecured entrance, so we kept climbing and climbing. Things started to get weird. The stairs were in the form of a zigzag with no railing, so you could fall down the middle. To get to this staircase, you had to go through a long dark hallway, so once you're at the bottom of the stairs, there is almost no light. Soon we began to realize that at the end of each zigzag, there were these holes in the wall. To get through one, you'd have to pull yourself up into it, because it was just a tiny slit at the top. We flipped a coin, and it was decided I was to go through. I wish I never had. I pray to God I never had. I crawled through, and hopped inside into a box-like confinement with no windows or anything. You couldn't fully stand up. You had to either lay down or squat. I looked around and found pornography plastered all over the walls of this place, as well as tissues and other disgusting stuff. Injection needles were among one of the things there too, and I believe I have a picture of that somewhere. That wasn't the worst part though. The worst part was when I took a look at a notebook laying on the ground. The writing was in a foreign language which I could read, and it documented a worker's logs. There was a name followed by a sign-in and sign-out timestamp. The most recent entry was made 2 days ago. 2 fucking days ago. I rushed out of that space like my life depended on it, and told my friend we've got to get going. While I was inside, my friend noticed that there was one of these slits on every level, and that they were numbered and had a placeholder for a tag. They were cells. We noped the hell out of there and began climbing down when I responded to my friend. It's almost 1 a.m, and we need to go now before it's too late. We were going to go to a club after this. Teenagers. It took me some time, but I finally persuaded him to go back up and make it to the roof, then leave. We went up and up and up until finally we saw light. Delighted, we burst through the door, completely without thinking, and began expressing our relief in cries of joy. We felt like we had conquered the worst part, and completely relaxed. Everything was going great until suddenly my friend freezes in his tracks and tells me to shut the hell up right now and get to the staircase. Panicked, I asked him what he's on about. The staircase we had just come from had like a little house over it, if that makes sense, and he was looking at something over the edge of the corner. Then I hear another voice, which is definitely not my friend's. We were both these 2 fairly well-off kids from American upbringings, and the man was speaking a foreign language. Luckily I could understand it, but we liked to frequently pretend that I did not, just to fuck with the locals and spy on people. He was used to me routinely pretending I don't understand a word, so when the man said something, he just stayed quiet and motioned that I keep my mouth shut. My friend was signaling for me to get to the staircase when I heard the man yell, "Don't move," in the foreign language. I froze dead and didn't know what to do. 5 men come from around the house thingy into my sight. 2 men were standing. The others were sitting on the curb of the roof. One push, and they'd tumble down to their death. Now, these guys looked serious. Pumped arms, sweatpants, bandanas, and for the best part, swastikas on their arms. The prison had a lot of racists, anti-Jew, anti-immigrant, anti-people in general type of stuff going on. This we never expected, though. The man motions at me and yells, "Come here." I nervously tell him in English that I do not understand. I don't know how I thought this would help, but I speak quite a bit of German, and I suppose in my logical brain I thought, Maybe they would do less harm to 2 Germans. By luck, my friend happened to be Swiss and spoke it fluently. The man yells to us, "What language you speaking?" I replied, "Deutsche." My friend looks over at me panicking, desperate to know what our next move should be. "Ah, Germans." And the group laughs. I hear one of the men say to the others in the foreign language, "They've seen the products." The head of the gang looks at us and comes closer. It was really dark, so I couldn't see what they had circled around, but there were black gym bags at their feet. "Come closer," he says to both of us. We come up closer to the group, and the man starts asking us questions in English. Who we are, why we are there. He then started asking personal questions, our full names, where we live, etc. The questions were clearly directed at making it easier to find out as much about us as they can. Neither of us had money, but we both had our iPhones on us. We had no idea what they planned for us next. One of the sitting guys gets up and asks me, "Did you see anything?" "No," I shakily reply. Then he comes to my friend and asks him the same for a brief moment. I glanced over at the bags and I suddenly wished I would be anywhere but there. Hell, I would rather be in that cell than there. I wish we had never come back. I think you can guess what was in the bags. Guns. Not just one gun, guns. As in bags and bags of what were probably illegal firearms. In a smaller bag to the side there was a ton of rolled up cash. We just stumbled into an illicit firearm deal. The guys now started discussing amongst each other about what they were going to do with us. They didn't know that I understood every single word. One of them kept pleading, "They're just stupid kids. And if they rough us up a bit, we won't tell anyone." Another one insisted they take us to Gustav. I'm happy I never met Gustav. Meanwhile, I was trying to come up with an escape plan. The real prison was visible from where we were standing, but by the time the security guards from there got up here, we would be dead. The staircase where we came from was pitch black, and we would stumble our way down and probably die. Either way, we end up dead. So I go for plan C. Mr. Ringleader says that one of them should walk us home, to see where we really live, and threaten us if we tell. That's when I had a better idea. The roofs. We could run back down the stairs, but the abandoned prison complex was huge, and basically many buildings of different sizes all near each other. You could hop down from roof to roof and escape via that way. Just as one of them starts arguing about taking us to Gustav, one of their phones rings, and I take that as my cue. I scream, "Follow me!" to my friend, and began descending down the roofs. Now, I know this is stupid logic, but I thought they'd never shoot us near a real prison. It's too risky. It really wasn't too difficult. We just kept jumping on a lower and lower building, and eventually we were down. Our feet hit the ground, and we began running through the grounds. Since I knew it quite well, and knew exactly where to run to escape to a main road on the other side of the wall, I suddenly heard men yelling in the background, and the sound of barking dogs. Security from the real prison must have seen us running and came to see who was there. I screamed to them in the foreign language, "There's men, and they've got guns." It seemed they already knew we were not the primary concern, as they ran in the direction we came from, and not where we were going. We didn't stop running until we reached the city center. And we didn't return to the prison. We never reported anything that happened, and have no follow-up on who the men were. Illegal drugs and stuff were common where we were living. Never thought to find guns. To be honest though, it wasn't the first time we'd heard about weapons deals going down. It's hushed up, but not that hard to get your hands on where we lived. We didn't go back, needless to say. To think that roof could have been the last thing I saw. Or Gustav's apartment. 2. This happened 2 years ago in December. I will start off by telling you about myself and my friend, as it will help you understand the situation better. I was 20 years old. I'm 5'4" and weighed about 140 pounds. My friend Jess was 21 and was around 5'6" and weighed about 180 pounds. We both go to university and live pretty close to campus, as well as a number of clubs, and we lived down a pretty shady street. It had a lot of break-ins, wasn't well lit, and was pretty creepy at night. And our house wasn't really the most secure. We started the night out with 3 of us going to one of the local clubs. Jess, myself, and another female housemate called Liz. While we were there, we did get pretty drunk. Liz met up with her boyfriend in the club and told us she would go home with him instead of coming back to the house. By this time, Jess was completely obliterated, could not stand straight. It was just really time for me to take her home. She gets into these states a lot, so I'm used to sobering up if I have to take care of her. Jess, Liz, Liz's boyfriend, and I all left the club. We lived about 15 minutes away from this club, and all of us had done this walk before 1,000,000 times, sometimes alone, so we weren't really worried about it. Jess goes to be sick by a bus stop next to the club. Liz and her boyfriend take this as an opportunity to bolt and leave me to take Jess home. As they are walking away, I shouted at them to come back and help, but they literally just ignored me and walked off. I got Jess up off the floor and got underneath her arm to try and help her walk home. This works for about 5 feet when she starts rolling around the place, walking into fences, and like I said, she was just not with it. We finally make it further down the road, where there weren't as many people at all. We were around 5 minutes away from the house, and we stopped for Jess to be sick again. Over the road, there is a police station, but it's not really a used one. I've been there once when I lost my passport, and it wasn't open. Suddenly, a guy appears from around the corner of the station and comes over to us on the other side of the road. He's foreign but speaks English well and asks me if I need help. As I could really have done with a hand to get Jess home, as she was getting worse by the minute, I said yes. He smiles and we both pick Jess up. He gets under her arm on the one side and me on the other. Jess keeps mumbling incoherently, and we finally make some ground, until she falls forward. She sits up against the wall and starts being sick again. I reach down to pick her up, and the guy puts his hand out and says, "No, leave her," and offers me a cigarette. I take one and we have a couple of puffs, and then Jess pats my arm and puts her fingers out for the cigarette. So I give it to her. While she was smoking, the guy was just making general chit-chat, and as I didn't know him, I asked if he could take us a bit further down the road, where the top of our street was, and I could take it from there. He suddenly got really strange and said, "No, you smoke with me. You come to my house and we have party." To which I replied, "No, sorry, we need to get home." To this he replies, "Do boys live in your house?" Which was a bit of a red flag. We lived with 2 other boys, and they weren't the confrontational type at all, but I wasn't going to advertise that. So I lied a little and said, "Yes, we live with 3 boys and my boyfriend is meeting us at the house." He got a bit angry from this response and went, "Pfft, boyfriend." I got a bit cagey and suddenly said to Jess, "Jess, can you walk? We need to go home." Jake has texted me and he is meeting us at the door. He wasn't, but I was trying to make it so this guy wouldn't bother trying to get into an unsavory situation. Jess stands up, still mumbling, and the man grabs her hand and says, Wait, we party, you come to my house, and we party. At this point, I was ready to get the hell away from this guy because he was really annoying me. So I grab Jesse's arm and tell him to let go. He does, and we leave him standing in the street. Me and Jess continue down to the garage, which is around the corner from our house, and I guide her down our street. This guy comes sprinting, and I mean sprinting, around the corner and shouts, "Party girls, wait up!" By this point, I am like, "Oh, will you just fuck off?" I'm practically dragging Jess down the street to our door, and this guy jogs down to our house. As I'm unlocking the door, he grabs Jess and starts shoving his tongue down her throat. My face automatically dropped, as did my heart and my stomach, and this guy was staring into my eyes as if to say, "Well, what the fuck are you going to do?" While he was abusing her face, and then he started putting his hand up her skirt, and I saw red. So I screamed at him, telling him to fuck off and get the fuck off my friend, and dragged Jess inside the house. I'm standing at the doorway, about to close the door, and he says, "Where is boyfriend?" I come in, we party, and walks towards the door. I'm starting to gather that this party doesn't mean party, and means he's going to try something dodgy on my nearly incapacitated friend, and probably me as well. So I do what a crazy woman would do. I step out, shut Jess in the house, and sprint at him, chasing him down the road, cursing and telling him to get the fuck away from my house, and that I'm going to call the police. When I get back to the house, I'm trying to get Jess into bed and clean her up a bit, and there is a pounding on the door. I open the door, with the chain on, and this guy is there. He starts trying to put his arm through the door. At this point, I was full-blown crazy, and I just punched his arm. And when he pulled it out, I slammed the door and shouted I was going to call the police. He shouted, "I come again another time, party girl," and left. When Jess woke up in the morning, I told her what had happened, as she didn't remember, and asked her if she wanted to phone the police, to which she declined. Thankfully, we haven't seen him since, but if I did, I would do more than chase him and punch his arm. 3. It was the middle of the night, maybe 12 or 1 in the morning, and I had snuck out to go get a bag of chips or something from the gas station a few blocks away from my house. It was the middle of December, and it was snowing pretty heavily outside. For the record, I was 14 or 15 at the time. I've always been pretty small, at about 5'4" in height and 115 pounds in weight. I'm female, but I've always had short hair and kind of a boyish face. The gas station was completely empty, besides a woman behind the cash register, who I remember had been far too busy with filing her nails to pay too much attention. I had been picking through some of the chip bags to find something good, when I heard the ding of the door as someone entered the small gas station. I didn't bother to look to see who it was. When I finally found what I was looking for, I turned to start heading towards the refrigerated section for a drink, before seeing the person who had just walked through the door. It was a tall, thin man, maybe 6'2", with brown hair, a red trucker hat, and a short, scruffy beard. He looked like he was in his late 30s or early 40s. I was surprised that I didn't recognize the man. I lived in a small mountain town, and everyone knew everyone. Oddly enough, he was wearing a short-sleeved t-shirt and shorts, despite it being freezing cold outside. His shirt and pants were covered in grass stains, as if he had just been working on a lawn or something. He turned to me and smiled a toothy grin before moving away from the door to the refrigerated area, so that I could grab what I needed. I knew I shouldn't have seen anything wrong with this, but something about the grin and the way his eyes looked me over was already kind of a red flag. I've always been a very nervous and paranoid person. I moved in and opened the door, quickly grabbing a drink and backing off. Before I could turn away, I heard the man's raspy voice as he spoke to me. "Hey, you look familiar," the man said. He had a somewhat southern accent, which wasn't uncommon considering where I lived. "Oh, yeah?" I responded, not sure what to say to him. He introduced himself as Thomas, before leaning against the door.
"Why is a young man like you doing out this late?"
he asked. Again, I wasn't sure what to say. I wasn't a boy for one thing, but I didn't bother to correct him. I was just getting a snack. I responded, trying to inch my way away, trying to give off the hint that I didn't want to talk. Yet, the man just trailed behind me.
"Do you know my daughter?"
he asked me, cutting off one of the aisles. "Well, who is your daughter?" I asked shakily in response. The man frowned at me, his eyes narrowing in my direction. He refused to tell me her name, claiming that he didn't want boys touching his daughter. I was confused by the sudden change of mood, so I didn't say anything else. I started making my way towards the register before he cut me off again.
"Do you need a ride? It's cold out there,"
he said, getting uncomfortably close. At this point, I could smell the alcohol on Thomas's breath. It made me very uncomfortable. "No, thank you," I said, trying to move around him. He insisted, and yet again, I refused. I moved to try and push past him, bumping into a metal shelf. A can of chips fell off the shelf, hitting the floor. The lady behind the register had looked up from what she was doing, noticing me and the man. "Are you ready to check out?" she asked me, glaring at Thomas. I nodded, and the man moved out of my way. I paid for the chips and drink, before thanking the woman, and moving out of the gas station. But it didn't end there. When I began my walk down the snowy road, I saw the man get into his truck, before getting out a minute later. I was already quite a ways away when he began walking in the same direction I was. I would have called someone for help at this point, but I didn't have a phone at the time. I quickened my pace, and eventually, he turned around and went home. I don't want to think what would have happened if the man would have kept following me. So Thomas, I don't think we should meet again. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to True Scary Stories, episode 83. Now, in regards to the first story there, I'm sure some of you might have heard it. Well, the reason for that is it has been out for a little while now, about a month and a half, I think. I had actually originally recorded it as part of a collaboration with another YouTuber, but that YouTuber is, well, I think they're pretty busy, is what's going on there. And so they're not able to get their half of our collaboration up, and they can't really say when they'll get it up. But it is a very good story, and I don't really like to keep people waiting too long with this sort of thing. So I've decided I was just going to pop it in this video, so I can tell the person who let me use it, and thank them for letting me use it, that it's up and they can have a listen to it. It really is too good a story to go to waste. But that doesn't mean that you won't hear it on another channel somewhere down the line. So, if you do, that's why. Okay, I think that's about it for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.